My brother sold his signed baseball glove at 13 to buy me a new bike after mine got stolen. When our mom died, he spent $12,000 fighting for custody, so I wouldn't go to foster care. His roommate Craig told me I was draining my brother by grieving our mom, so I started eating only 400 calories a day. When my brother found out and kicked Craig out, Craig called CPS with false abuse reports, drained our bank accounts, got my brother fired, and stalked us for months until the entire apartment building helped us fight back. Okay, I guess that's a pretty weird way of saying it, but he really is my hero. One of my first memories is being 6 years old and walking out of the grocery store together. My bike had vanished and the broken chain was left behind. I immediately broke into tears, blaming myself, but the next morning I woke up to a new bike in my bedroom because my brother, who was just 13 at the time, had sold his favorite signed baseball glove to pay for it. And when I thanked him profusely, he just hugged me and said, "This is what brothers are for." His love was always unconditional. So we were both in the car one day when a truck driver was driving dangerously close to us on the highway. I was listening to white girl music and pretending to be in a music video. So when my brother was shouting at me to put my seatbelt on, I didn't listen. And my mom just laughed and told him to stop being so overprotective. But my brother didn't care. He reached across to secure me right as the impact happened. And just 11 days later, we were standing at our mom's grave in black clothes that still had the tags on. I was 14 and my brother was 21. We didn't even have time to grieve because they tried to shove me into a foster home and lock away the key. But Caleb did everything to make sure it didn't happen. He spent his entire savings on fighting for custody, and there was a long list of things he had to do before they even considered letting him be my legal parent, rent a huge apartment, take parenting classes for 8 months every weekend, and even broke up with his girlfriend of 5 years to make sure it didn't interfere with the case. After 2 years and $12,000 down the drain, he finally won. The 3 weeks that followed were probably some of the best I'd ever experienced. For the first time, everything just felt peaceful. He was the only person I felt safe enough to let my guard down with, and for the first time since the crash, I actually let myself grieve. No dark humor, no fake smiles, just me crying into his arms. And that's when his roommate Craig moved in, because he simply couldn't afford to pay rent by himself. At first he seemed nice, and my older brother Caleb seemed to trust him, so I did too. He didn't work much since his parents paid for everything, so I came home to him every day after school. And in the second week, while I did my usual routine of crying my eyes out and looking at old photos of my mom, Craig came into my bedroom. "You know Caleb's too nice to ever say this, but you're seriously draining him. Maybe keep it to yourself sometimes." His tone was completely flat, like he was sick of me. When he walked out, I was immediately filled with self-hatred. From then on, I made sure to only cry at school in the bathrooms. Whenever I was home, I'd gaslight myself into thinking I was over the death and ready to move on with my life. And since I wasn't crying when I needed to, I took on a new coping mechanism: starvation. I must have been eating around 400 calories a day, with a diet of ice cubes and chewing gum. One day I was heading down the stairs to school. My calves were aching from how little I was eating, and I was so weak that my school bag felt like it was filled with bricks. "Hey!" Craig yelled. "I've noticed how far you've come with the whole moving on thing. Just wanted to give you kudos." I was so hungry that I couldn't even focus on what he was saying, so I just nodded before getting on the school bus. I was wearing a t-shirt and short shorts when Caleb burst into my room that evening. His jaw dropped. "What the actual F? I'm sorry!" I screamed. "I thought you wouldn't be home." I then grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around myself. "Olivia, when was the last time you ate a full plate of food?" Tears filled his eyes and his hands were trembling. Suddenly, a wave of guilt washed over me. "I'm sorry, Caleb. You weren't meant to see." He cut me off by lunging at me for a hug. "Olivia, you love food. I don't understand why you would do this." By this point, I was still convinced that Caleb was mad at me, so I just wanted him to stop blaming me. Craig told me to. He didn't say anything. His grip on me loosened, and he had this faraway look in his eye. It was 4 a.m. when Craig came home that evening, and I guess Caleb assumed I was asleep, because as soon as the front door slammed, my brother was walking down the stairs to greet him. I heard him crash into something as he stumbled backwards from Caleb's impact. "You're moving out tomorrow. I'd gaff where you end up, but if I see you go anywhere near my sister, you're effing dead." His voice had an anger I didn't recognize, and I guess Craig was pretty scared too, because he didn't respond. When Caleb came up the stairs, he opened my door and grabbed me gently to see if I was awake. I turned over to face him. "I'm sorry. I know rent is more expensive now. Don't be." His voice was soft and reassuring like always. "Craig can eat shy tea. You will always come first." The day after he moved out, there was a knock on the door. It was the police. They had gotten an anonymous report that Caleb was abusing me. I stood frozen as the officers explained they needed to investigate the report. My hands trembled while Caleb calmly invited them inside, his jaw tight but his voice steady. The female officer asked to speak with me privately while her partner stayed with Caleb in the living room. In my bedroom, she examined my arms for bruises that didn't exist. I showed her my room, my schoolwork scattered on the desk, photos of Mom and Caleb covering the walls. She asked gentle questions about our daily routine, about meals, about discipline. I answered honestly, explaining how Caleb worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, how he helped with homework every night despite exhaustion, how he'd given up everything for me. The officer's expression softened as I spoke. She noticed the parenting class certificates framed on Caleb's wall when we passed his room. The custody battle paperwork sat organized in labeled folders on his desk, evidence of his dedication. After an hour, they determined the report was unfounded and left with apologies. Caleb collapsed on the couch afterward, head in his hands. I sat beside him, guilt churning in my stomach. This was Craig's doing. We both knew it. The timing was too perfect, too calculated. Craig knew exactly what buttons to push, what accusations would hurt most. The next morning, our landlord called. Someone had complained about noise violations, claiming we threw parties every night. Caleb's voice strained as he explained we'd been asleep by 9 most nights, exhausted from work and school. The landlord seemed skeptical but agreed to note our side of the story. At school, I couldn't concentrate. Every class felt like walking through fog. During lunch, I hid in the library, picking at an apple Caleb had packed with a note reminding me to eat. My stomach twisted with each bite, Craig's words echoing about being a burden, but Caleb's note sat there, his messy handwriting saying, "Love you, kiddo." Protein bar in the side pocket too. That afternoon, I came home to find Caleb on the phone with our bank. Someone had reported his debit card stolen and they'd frozen our account. He paced the kitchen, explaining explaining he had the card in his hand, that we needed access to pay rent. The representative said it would take 3 to 5 business days to resolve. I watched my brother's shoulders tense with each new obstacle. He'd already been stretched thin before Craig left, and now this. I wanted to help, but didn't know how. Instead, I started dinner, using what we had in the pantry. Caleb found me stirring pasta sauce and pulled me into a hug. We ate mostly in silence, both lost in thought. Caleb's phone buzzed with texts from his boss about missing his shift that morning due to the police visit. His jaw clenched as he typed responses, probably apologizing again, probably begging to keep his job. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated. Our neighbors, who'd always smiled and waved, now avoided eye contact. Mrs. Chen from next door actually crossed the street when she saw me coming home from school. Mr. Rodriguez stopped letting his kids play in the shared courtyard when I was around. Caleb noticed too. He tried talking to them, but they made excuses and hurried away. Someone had been spreading rumors, poisoning the well of goodwill we'd built in this community. The isolation felt suffocating. Then the bills started arriving. Cable services we'd never ordered, magazine subscriptions neither of us wanted, all in Caleb's name. Each one required phone calls to cancel, hours on hold, explaining over and over that we hadn't signed up for anything. Time Caleb didn't have between his jobs. I found him one night at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, calculator in hand. The electricity bill had doubled, claiming we'd been running some kind of business from the apartment. Another false report to investigate, another battle to fight. My grades started slipping. Teachers noticed my distraction, my exhaustion. The school counselor called Caleb in for a meeting, concerned about the changes in my behavior. Another afternoon, he had to take off work, another mark against him at a job we desperately needed. During the meeting, I sat between them as the counselor expressed worries about my weight loss, my declining participation, my obvious anxiety. Caleb explained we were dealing with some harassment from a former roommate, keeping it vague. The counselor took notes, promised to check in regularly. Walking to the car afterward, Caleb's phone rang. His second job, the weekend warehouse shift that helped cover extras, was letting him go. Too many missed shifts, they said. Too unreliable. I watched my brother's face crumble for just a moment before he forced a smile and told me it would be okay. That night, I heard him on the phone with the utility companies, negotiating payment plans. His voice stayed level and polite despite everything. When he thought I was asleep, I heard him in his room, muffled sounds that might have been crying or just exhaustion. The next morning, a social worker appeared at our door. Another anonymous report, this time claiming educational neglect. She needed to verify I was attending school regularly, review my records, inspect our living conditions. Caleb missed another morning of work. The social worker was thorough but kind. She saw my perfect attendance record until recently, noted the circumstances of our situation, but she still had to file her report, still had to follow up. Another official eye on us, another pressure point Craig had created. Our mailbox became a source of dread. Some days it was empty when it shouldn't be. Bills and important documents mysteriously vanishing. Other days it overflowed with junk, all addressed to Caleb, all requiring attention to sort through and cancel. I started walking different routes home from school, paranoid about being watched. Every anonymous report had details only someone monitoring us would know. When I mentioned this to Caleb, his face darkened, but he just told me to be careful and text him when I got home. The grocery store incident happened on a Thursday. Caleb's debit card was declined for $30 of groceries. The account showed a zero balance despite his paycheck depositing 2 days before. Mysterious charges to online gaming sites had drained everything. He paid with crumpled cash from his wallet while I stood there, cheeks burning. Back home, he spent hours on the phone with the bank's fraud department. They would investigate, they said. The money might be returned in 7 to 10 business days. Rent was due in 3. I found Caleb's notebook where he tracked expenses, saw the careful calculations, the shrinking numbers. He'd been skipping meals, I realized, making sure I had enough while he survived on coffee and whatever was free at work. The guilt made my chest tight. That weekend, the internet got shut off. Non-payment, the company claimed, though Caleb had the bank statement showing the automatic payment. Another call, another hour explaining, another promise to investigate. I needed the internet for homework, adding another stress to the pile. Caleb borrowed a neighbor's Wi-Fi password, but even that felt tainted. The neighbor, usually friendly, handed it over reluctantly, mentioning he'd heard things, but wouldn't elaborate. The poison had spread far. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything. Dates, times, incidents. Caleb didn't know, but I thought maybe we'd need evidence eventually. Each entry made the pattern clearer. Craig wasn't just lashing out randomly. This was calculated destruction. The breaking point came when Caleb got a call from his primary job. Someone had sent an anonymous email to corporate with photos of him sleeping on the job, clearly doctored but convincing enough to warrant investigation. He had to meet with HR, provide his side, wait for their decision. That night, Caleb sat me down at the kitchen table. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhaustion written in every line of his face. He explained we might need to move, start fresh somewhere Craig couldn't reach. The thought of leaving the only stable home I'd known since Mom died made my throat close up, but I nodded, told him I'd go anywhere with him. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and for a moment the weight seemed lighter. We were still together, still fighting. Craig could take a lot from us, but not that. The next morning brought new challenges. Our car had a flat tire, the third this month. Caleb changed it with practiced efficiency, but I saw him examining the puncture, saw his jaw clench when he found what looked like a deliberate cut. I went to school trying to act normal, but whispers followed me. Somehow, rumors had spread there too. Kids I'd known for years suddenly had questions about my home life, about whether I was really safe. The isolation was complete. That afternoon, I came home to find an eviction notice taped to our door. Noise complaints, police visits, social services reports. The landlord had had enough. We had 30 days to vacate. Caleb wasn't home yet, so I carefully peeled it off and brought it inside, my hands shaking. When Caleb saw it, something shifted in his expression. Not defeat, but a kind of grim determination. He made a call to a lawyer friend from his parenting classes, speaking in low tones about harassment and defamation, but legal help cost money we didn't have. That night, neither of us slept well. I could hear Caleb moving around, probably running numbers again, trying to figure out how to make nothing stretch into something. The weight of being 16 and helpless pressed down on me. The morning brought a small reprieve. Caleb's job had completed their investigation and found the photos were fake. He still had work, at least for now. He hugged me extra tight before leaving, whispering that we'd figure it out. I spent that morning cleaning the apartment while Caleb Caleb was at work, trying to make it look perfect for potential landlord visits. The eviction notice weighed heavy in my mind as I scrubbed counters and vacuumed carpets. Around noon, I heard footsteps in the hallway and froze. Through the peephole, I saw Craig standing outside our door, holding a box. My heart pounded as he knocked. I stayed silent, barely breathing. He knocked again, harder this time. Then he set the box down and left. I waited 20 minutes before opening the door. Inside the box were some of Caleb's old clothes and a note claiming he'd forgotten them. But underneath, I found printed screenshots of text messages I'd never sent. Horrible things about Caleb that made my stomach turn. I photographed everything and added it to my growing collection of evidence. The journal had become my lifeline, documenting Craig's campaign against us, each page filled with dates, times, and details of his harassment. I hid it under my mattress, paranoid he might somehow get to it. Caleb came home early that day, his face tight with stress. He'd received another call at work, this time from someone claiming to be from the health department. They'd gotten a report about unsanitary living conditions and needed to schedule an inspection. He'd managed to convince them to wait until the weekend, but it meant more time off work to be home for it. We spent the evening deep cleaning an already spotless apartment. I scrubbed the bathroom while Caleb tackled the kitchen, both of us working in tense silence. The health inspector arrived Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, going through every room with meticulous attention. She found nothing wrong, of course, but the visit ate up Caleb's entire morning. That afternoon, I was doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent me a photo of our apartment building with a message about knowing where I lived. My hands shook as I showed Caleb. He immediately called the phone company to block the number, but we both knew it was just another of Craig's tactics. The psychological warfare intensified over the following days. Pizza deliveries we hadn't ordered showed up at odd hours. Caleb had to explain to confused delivery drivers that we hadn't placed any orders, turning them away empty-handed. One night, 3 different restaurants sent food within an hour. The constant interruptions made it impossible to relax. I started noticing Craig's car parked on nearby streets when I walked to school, never close enough to be obvious, but always within sight. I changed my route daily, leaving at different times, but somehow he always seemed to know where I'd be. The feeling of being watched made my skin crawl. Caleb's work situation deteriorated further. His boss pulled him aside to discuss the numerous concerned calls they'd been receiving about him. Someone had been calling repeatedly, claiming to be worried about his mental state, suggesting he was unstable and shouldn't be working with customers. Caleb explained about Craig, but his boss's expression remained skeptical. One evening, I came home to find Caleb on the couch, holding a letter from the DMV. Someone had reported his license plate as being involved in a hit and run. He'd have to go in person to clear it up, missing more work. The exhaustion on his face made him look years older than 23. I made us dinner while he called to reschedule his shift. His boss's patience was clearly wearing thin. After dinner, we sat together going through our finances. The numbers were grim. Between missed work and unexpected expenses, we were falling behind. The eviction notice loomed over everything. Mrs. Chen knocked on our door that night. She handed Caleb a petition some neighbors had started about problematic tenants. Our names weren't on it yet, but the implication was clear. She seemed uncomfortable, mentioning she'd been told things about us that concerned her. Caleb tried explaining, but she hurried away before he could finish. The next morning, I woke to find our apartment door had been egged overnight. Caleb was already outside with a bucket and sponge, scrubbing away the mess before other neighbors saw. I joined him, both of us working in the pre-dawn darkness. Neither of us mentioned how this was probably Craig's doing too. At school, I overheard classmates whispering about my family situation. Someone had been spreading stories about why I really lived with my brother, each version more twisted than the last. My friend Sarah pulled me aside during lunch, asking if I needed help, if I was safe at home. I assured her I was fine, but the doubt in her eyes stung. Caleb picked me up after school that day, something he rarely did anymore. He explained that someone had called the school claiming to be a concerned relative, asking about my attendance and grades. The administration wanted to meet with him again next week. This destruction of their lives hits you right in the gut. Craig's calculated attacks through fake reports, drained bank accounts show the evil. Caleb scrubbing eggs off their door in the darkness while protecting Olivia breaks my heart completely. Another afternoon, he'd have to miss work. We stopped at the bank on the way home. Caleb needed to close his account and open a new one after the repeated fraud attempts. The process took over an hour, with forms and explanations and suspicious looks from the bank manager. I sat beside him, watching his hands shake slightly as he signed paperwork. That night, Craig escalated further. Around midnight, our doorbell rang repeatedly. Caleb checked the peephole but saw no one. The ringing continued for 20 minutes before finally stopping. We found out the next morning that several neighbors had experienced the same thing. The building's anger toward us grew. I started documenting everything with my phone, taking photos and videos whenever possible. The folder grew daily with evidence of Craig's harassment. Caleb didn't know about my documentation project yet. I wanted to have everything ready before showing him, hoping it might help somehow. The weekend brought a new crisis. Caleb's car wouldn't start, and the mechanic found sugar in the gas tank. The repair would cost hundreds we didn't have. Caleb stood in the garage staring at the estimate, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I touched his arm, reminding him we'd figure it out together. We took the bus to his work that week. The commute added 2 hours to his day, meaning he left before dawn and returned after dark. I watched him grow thinner, the stress eating away at him. He never complained, but I could see the toll in his hollow eyes and forced smiles. One afternoon, I came home to find Craig in our building's laundry room. My blood ran cold as he smiled at me, all fake innocence. He mentioned how hard it must be for Caleb, working so much, dealing with so many problems. His tone was sympathetic, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I grabbed my laundry and fled. Caleb found me in our apartment, shaking. I told him about the encounter, and his face went dark. He made me promise to never be alone in common areas, to always have my phone ready. The fact that Craig could still access our building terrified both of us. The health department called again. Another complaint, this time about possible mold. They'd need to do a more thorough inspection, including air quality tests. Caleb's voice cracked as he scheduled the appointment. Each false report meant more time documenting our innocence, more energy spent fighting shadows. I noticed Caleb had stopped eating breakfast, claiming he wasn't hungry in the mornings, but I saw him counting the money in his wallet, calculating how many meals he could skip to make ends meet. I started packing extra food in my lunch, pretending I couldn't finish it and bringing it home for him. Our internet troubles continued. Even with the neighbor's Wi-Fi. The connection would mysteriously drop whenever I had important assignments due. I spent hours at the library after school, using their computers to complete homework. The librarian started recognizing me, offering sympathetic smiles. One evening, Caleb received an email from his employer's HR department. Someone had sent them links to social media profiles using his name, filled with inappropriate content. The profiles were clearly fake, but HR needed to investigate. Caleb spent hours on the phone, explaining, defending himself against accusations based on lies. The stress began affecting my health too. I developed headaches that wouldn't go away. My appetite disappeared despite Caleb's efforts to make sure I ate. At night, I lay awake listening for strange noises, jumping at every sound in the hallway. The constant vigilance exhausted me. Caleb tried to maintain normalcy, helping with homework when he could, asking about school, but I could see him struggling to focus, his mind clearly elsewhere. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence, lost in worry about our situation. I'd gently bring him back, pretending I hadn't noticed. The eviction deadline crept closer. Caleb spent his few free hours searching for new apartments, but our situation made it nearly impossible. Bad references from our current landlord, the recent instability in Caleb's employment, and our limited funds created an insurmountable barrier. Each rejection email added to the weight on his shoulders. I found myself growing angry rather than scared. Craig had targeted us because he thought we were weak, vulnerable, but he'd underestimated us. Every attack made me more determined to fight back, to protect my brother who'd sacrificed everything for me. I started planning, thinking of ways to expose Craig's lies. The school meeting arrived too quickly. I sat outside the principal's office while Caleb met with administrators. Through the door, I heard him explaining our situation, his voice steady despite everything. When he emerged an hour later, he looked drained but relieved. They'd agreed to monitor the situation but take no immediate action. That evening, we received notice that our rental application for a small apartment across town had been denied. The landlord cited concerns about stability and recent police involvement. Caleb crumpled the letter, the first sign of anger I'd seen from him through all of this. He threw it in the trash and went to his room without a word. I made dinner alone that night, listening to Caleb's muffled phone conversation through his door. He was calling old friends, looking for places to stay if the eviction went through. The desperation in his voice broke my heart. This wasn't fair. We'd done nothing wrong, yet we were being punished. The next morning brought another setback. Caleb's primary job had decided to reduce his hours pending the completion of their investigation. Half pay meant we couldn't even afford our current apartment, let alone save for a new one. Caleb received the news in silence, thanking his boss politely before hanging up. I skipped lunch that week, saving my lunch money to contribute to our funds. When Caleb noticed, he was furious, insisting I eat properly. We had our first real argument since Craig left, both of us snapping under the pressure. I stormed to my room, immediately regretting my harsh words. Later, I found Caleb sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by job applications. He was applying everywhere, even positions that paid far less than his current job. His laptop screen showed dozens of tabs open, each a different opportunity. I apologized, and he pulled me into a hug, both of us crying. The harassment took new forms. Our mail began arriving, opened or damaged. Important documents went missing entirely. Caleb had to request duplicate copies of everything, each requiring fees we couldn't afford. The postal service claimed they couldn't do anything without proof of tampering. I started recording everything on my phone, every interaction, every incident, every piece of evidence that might help us. The storage filled quickly with videos and photos. I backed everything up online, paranoid about losing the only proof we had of Craig's campaign against us. One afternoon, I arrived home to find an ambulance outside our building. My heart stopped, fearing something had happened to Caleb, but it was Mr. Rodriguez who'd had a panic attack. As the paramedics left, I heard neighbors muttering about the stress of living near problem tenants. Craig's poison had spread throughout the entire building. Caleb's car troubles worsened. After fixing the sugar damage, we discovered slashed tires, then a broken window. Each repair drained our meager savings further. Caleb started parking blocks away, hoping distance would protect the car, but somehow, Craig always found it. The school counselor called me in again, concerned about my declining grades and obvious stress. I sat in her office, wanting desperately to tell her everything, but I knew involving more authorities would only give Craig more ammunition. I assured her things would improve, forcing a smile I didn't feel. That evening, Caleb showed me his bank statement. We had less than $200 left. Rent was due in a week, and we were short by over $1,000. He'd applied for emergency assistance but been told the wait list was months long. The eviction seemed inevitable now. I made a decision that night. I would find Craig and confront him myself. This had to end. I told Caleb I was going to study at Sarah's house, the first real lie I'd told him. Instead, I took the bus to the coffee shop where I knew Craig hung out. My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. Craig sat in the corner typing on his laptop. When he saw me, his face split into a satisfied grin. I approached his table, my phone recording in my pocket. He gestured for me to sit, acting like we were old friends catching up. His casual cruelty made my stomach turn. The conversation was brief, but revealing. Craig spoke in riddles and implications, never directly admitting to anything, but his smirk told me everything. He mentioned how hard it must be for Caleb, how some people just weren't cut out for responsibility. His words dripped with false concern. I left the coffee shop feeling sick but victorious. The recording wasn't a confession, but it captured his tone, his subtle threats. Combined with everything else I'd documented, it painted a clear picture. I took the bus home, planning how to present everything to Caleb, but when I arrived, I found Caleb pacing the apartment, frantic. The school had called about my absence from Sarah's study group. He'd been terrified something had happened to me. The fear and anger in his eyes made me immediately confess where I'd really been. Caleb's reaction surprised me. Instead of anger, he pulled me close, voice shaking as he made me promise never to approach Craig alone again. He explained how dangerous it was, how Craig's behavior showed escalating instability. I realized then how much my safety meant to him, more than any apartment or job. That night, we sat together as I showed him everything I documented. The photos, videos, recordings, and journal entries. It's so sad watching Olivia secretly save her lunch money, while Caleb counts every penny in his wallet, and then the way these two are silently sacrificing for each other without saying a word shows a love so deep. His eyes widened as he scrolled through months of evidence I'd compiled. For the first time in weeks, I saw hope flicker across his face. We spent hours organizing everything into a comprehensive timeline, each incident documented printed, cross-referenced, and backed up with evidence. Caleb added his own documentation, and together we built an undeniable case of harassment. The folder grew thick with proof of Craig's systematic campaign. The next morning, Caleb made a decision. He called in sick to work, knowing it might cost him his job. Instead, he spent the day visiting every neighbor in our building. Armed with our evidence, he went door to door, showing them the truth. Some doors slammed in his face, but others listened. Mrs. Chen was the first to really hear him out. As Caleb showed her the timeline, her expression shifted from skepticism to horror. She hadn't realized how coordinated the harassment was, how many false reports had been filed. She apologized profusely, promising to speak with other neighbors. Word spread through the building quickly. Mr. Rodriguez knocked on our door that evening, shamefaced and apologetic. He'd received calls about us too, he admitted, but now understood they were lies. One by one, neighbors began to see how they'd been manipulated. The building manager called the next day. Several tenants had contacted him about the harassment situation. He agreed to meet with us to review our evidence. For the first time in months, it felt like someone in authority might actually listen. But Craig wasn't finished. That night, our power went out. Only our apartment was affected, and the electric company claimed our service had been disconnected for non-payment. Caleb spent hours on the phone, proving we'd paid, fighting to get service restored. We spent the night in darkness, using candles and flashlights. The next morning, I woke to find Caleb already gone. A note explained he'd left early to handle the power situation in person. I got ready for school by candlelight, feeling like we were living in another century. The food in our refrigerator had already started to spoil. At school, I could barely focus. Every class felt pointless when our lives were falling apart. During lunch, I sat alone, too exhausted to maintain friendships. Sarah tried to talk to me, but I couldn't find the energy to explain everything. The isolation felt complete. I came home to find the power restored, but Caleb unemployed. His boss had finally had enough of the missed shifts and distractions. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, termination letter in hand, looking defeated. I sat beside him, both of us staring at the paper that might seal our fate. But something had shifted in the building's atmosphere. Neighbors who'd avoided us now offered sympathetic smiles. Mrs. Chen brought over a casserole, mentioning she'd spoken to the landlord about our situation. Mr. Rodriguez offered Caleb temporary work helping with building maintenance. The eviction deadline loomed just days away. We'd packed our essential belongings, preparing for the worst. But Caleb refused to give up. He spent every waking hour job hunting, apartment searching, fighting to keep us together. His determination inspired me to keep fighting too. 2 days before the eviction, we received an unexpected call. The building manager wanted to meet with us urgently. We arrived at his office to find several neighbors already there, including Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez. They'd organized on our behalf, presenting a petition to let us stay. The manager had reviewed our evidence and the neighbors' testimonies. He'd also done his own investigation, discovering Craig had a history of similar behavior at previous residences. The eviction notice would be rescinded, he announced, and Craig would be permanently banned from the property. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. Caleb grabbed my hand, squeezing tight as the manager apologized for not investigating sooner. The neighbors who'd gathered applauded, some wiping away tears. It wasn't over yet, but we'd won this battle. That evening, we received another surprise. A neighbor who worked in IT had helped trace some of the fake social media accounts back to Craig. Combined with our evidence, it was enough to file a restraining order. Caleb made the call to his lawyer friend, who agreed to help pro bono. But even with the eviction canceled, our problems weren't solved. Caleb was still unemployed, our savings depleted, and Craig remained a threat despite the building ban. We celebrated quietly that night, both aware that the war wasn't over. Craig had lost this round, but he wouldn't give up easily. The next morning brought proof of that. Caleb's car had been vandalized again, this time with paint stripper poured over the hood. The damage was extensive, essentially totaling our only transportation. Caleb stared at the destroyed paint, fists clenched, trembling with suppressed rage. I touched his shoulder, reminding him we had evidence. We had support now. The security camera had likely caught Craig in the act. This time, his escalation would be his downfall. Caleb nodded, pulling out his phone to document the damage, adding it to our ever-growing file. The police arrived within an hour, taking our report seriously for the first time. The officer reviewed our evidence folder, eyes widening at the extent of documentation. He promised a thorough investigation, mentioning that Craig's pattern of behavior suggested escalating danger. That afternoon, I helped Caleb update his resume and apply for new positions. We worked side by side at the kitchen table, me researching openings while he tailored cover letters. The atmosphere was different now, charged with hope rather than despair. We were fighting back effectively. Mrs. Chen stopped by with news. Her nephew managed a restaurant downtown and needed a reliable assistant manager. She'd already put in a good word for Caleb. The interview was tomorrow. Caleb hugged her gratefully, this unexpected kindness overwhelming after months of isolation. I spent that evening helping Caleb prepare for the interview. We practiced questions, picked out his clothes, and strategized answers about his recent employment gap. His confidence had been shattered by recent events, but I watched it slowly rebuild as we worked. The harassment continued, but it felt different now that we weren't facing it alone. When fake food deliveries arrived, neighbors turned them away before they reached our door. When someone tried to access our mail, multiple residents reported it immediately. Craig's tactics were failing against community solidarity. Caleb's interview went well. He came home cautiously optimistic, describing how the manager had been understanding about our situation. Mrs. Chen's recommendation carried weight, and they'd offered him a position starting the following week. The pay was less than before, but it was stable employment. That night, we finally allowed ourselves to truly relax. We ordered pizza with our last $20, celebrating Caleb's new job and our community's support. For the first time in months, I saw my brother genuinely smile. The stress lines around his eyes softened slightly, but Craig made one final desperate move. The next morning, we woke to find graffiti spray painted on our door, horrible accusations in red paint for all to see. But instead of isolation, neighbors appeared with cleaning supplies. Together, we scrubbed away Craig's lies, united in our refusal to let him win. The security footage clearly showed Craig committing vandalism. Combined with our mountain of evidence, it was enough for immediate action. The restraining order was approved that afternoon. Craig would be arrested if he came within 500 feet of us or contacted us in any way. As we stood in the courthouse holding the restraining order, I felt the weight of months of terror finally lifting. Caleb looked exhausted but victorious. We'd survived Craig's campaign campaign of destruction, emerged stronger and more united. The battle was won, though we knew healing would take time. Walking home, neighbors greeted us warmly. The building that had once felt hostile now felt like home again. Mr. Rodriguez mentioned his cousin needed tutoring for her daughter, suggesting I might be interested in earning some extra money. The community that Craig had tried to turn against us had become our greatest strength. That evening, Caleb and I sat on our small balcony, watching the sunset. Tomorrow he'd start his new job, I'd return to focusing on school, and we'd begin rebuilding our lives. Craig's shadow still loomed, but it no longer controlled us. We'd learned to fight back, to stand together, to find strength in unexpected places. The war with Craig wasn't quite over, but this battle was won. As we headed inside to make dinner together, I realized something important. Craig had tried to destroy us by attacking our vulnerabilities. Instead, he'd revealed our strength, and that strength would carry us through whatever came next. The restraining order felt like a hollow victory when I spotted Craig's car parked 3 blocks from our apartment the next morning. He was technically outside the 500-foot radius, but the message was clear. I documented it with my phone before heading to school, adding to our evidence folder that now contained hundreds of files. Caleb started his new job at the restaurant that week. The early morning prep work meant leaving before dawn, but he seemed grateful for the routine. I watched him iron his uniform with careful precision, trying to make a good impression despite everything we'd endured. The dark circles under his eyes had become permanent fixtures. At school, I struggled to catch up on missed assignments. My teachers showed patience, but I could see their concern. Sarah approached me after English class, offering her notes from the weeks I'd been too distracted to focus. I accepted gratefully, realizing how much I'd isolated myself during Craig's campaign. The sheer power of community rising up to protect them makes my chest tight with emotion. Watching Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez organize that petition while Caleb and Olivia sat there expecting the worst. That moment when the manager said they could stay must have felt like the whole world shifting back into place. That afternoon, I came home to find a package on our doorstep with no return address. My hands trembled as I photographed it before bringing it inside. Inside were copies of our lease agreement with sections highlighted, along with printouts of tenant law websites. No note, but Craig's implication was obvious. He was studying ways to get us evicted despite the manager's decision. Caleb arrived home exhausted from his first full shift. His feet hurt from standing all day, and burns from the kitchen equipment marked his forearms. But he smiled when describing his coworkers, people who didn't know our history, who treated him normally. I helped him soak his feet while we went through the day's mail together. The building's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Mrs. Chen invited us for dinner that weekend, wanting to make amends for believing Craig's lies. Mr. Rodriguez asked if I could help his daughter with math homework, offering to pay me $20 per session. These small gestures meant everything after months of isolation. But Craig adapted his tactics. Since he couldn't enter the building, he found other ways to harass us. Caleb's new workplace started receiving anonymous complaints about food safety. The manager dismissed them, having already been warned about our situation. But each call disrupted service and frustrated staff. I developed a new morning routine, checking for Craig's car before leaving for school. Some days I'd spot it immediately. Other days I'd notice it following the bus at a distance. I documented every sighting, building our case for police intervention if he violated the restraining order. The financial pressure eased slightly with Caleb's new income, but we were still behind on bills. I started tutoring Mr. Rodriguez's daughter 3 evenings per week, earning $60 that went straight to groceries. Watching Caleb's relief when I contributed made the extra work worthwhile. One morning, I found our car covered in flyers accusing Caleb of theft. They were tucked under every windshield in the parking lot, spreading lies to anyone who'd read them. Neighbors helped us collect them all, many expressing disgust at Craig's continued harassment. We added the flyers to our evidence file. Caleb's confidence grew with each successful day at work. His manager praised his reliability. His coworkers included him in their jokes. He came home with leftover food from the restaurant, proper meals that helped him regain weight. I saw glimpses of the brother I'd known before Craig entered our lives. The police finally took action when security footage showed Craig spray painting our door. They arrested him for vandalism and violating the restraining order. Caleb and I watched from our window as they led him away in handcuffs. The relief was overwhelming, but we both knew jail time would be minimal. During Craig's brief incarceration, we experienced something we'd almost forgotten: peace. No mysterious packages, no following cars, no anonymous calls. Caleb slept through the night for the first time in months. I caught up on schoolwork, my grades slowly recovering from their nosedive, but the peace was temporary. Craig posted bail after 3 days, and the harassment resumed with renewed intensity. Now he was more careful, staying just within legal boundaries. His car appeared at precisely 501 feet from our building. The calls to Caleb's work came from different numbers, harder to trace. I started walking to school with other students from our building, safety in numbers. Caleb arranged his schedule to avoid walking alone at night. We adapted our lives around Craig's presence, refusing to let him control us while staying vigilant about our safety. The tutoring sessions with Mr. Rodriguez's daughter became a bright spot in my week. She was struggling with algebra, but eager to learn. Her progress made me consider becoming a teacher someday, helping kids the way my teachers had helped me through difficult times. Caleb's manager offered him additional shifts, impressed by his work ethic. The extra income meant we could finally catch up on bills, even start a small emergency fund. Each deposit felt like a victory against Craig's attempts to destroy us financially. One evening, Craig escalated dramatically. We heard commotion in the hallway and opened our door to find him arguing with neighbors, claiming he had belongings in our apartment. The building security arrived quickly, escorting him out while he shouted accusations. Several neighbors recorded the incident on their phones. The next day, we learned Craig had been contacting our extended family members through social media. Distant relatives we barely knew received messages claiming Caleb was holding me hostage, that I needed rescue. Most ignored him, but a few called concerned. We spent hours explaining the situation, Craig's lies spreading like poison to every corner of our lives. I created a document explaining Craig's harassment to share with anyone he might contact. It included key dates, the restraining order information, and contact details for the police officer handling our case. We sent it to family, friends, Caleb's workplace, and my school, trying to get ahead of Craig's next move. The stress manifested physically. I developed stomach problems that made eating difficult. Caleb's hands shook constantly, even when he tried to hide it. We were winning the war against Craig, but the cost was becoming becoming evident in our bodies and minds. Mrs. Chen's nephew, Caleb's boss, implemented new security measures at the restaurant. Staff were instructed to hang up on anonymous callers, and security cameras were installed after Craig was spotted loitering nearby. The support from Caleb's workplace helped immensely. I threw myself into tutoring, adding 2 more students from our building. The money helped, but more importantly, it gave me purpose beyond documenting Craig's harassment. Teaching others helped me feel useful, productive, normal in a situation that was anything but. Craig's next tactic involved contacting my school directly. He posed as a concerned uncle, claiming Caleb was neglecting my education. The administration, already aware of our situation, dismissed his claims, but the fact that he was now targeting my education infuriated me in a way nothing else had. We learned from the police that Craig had a history we hadn't known about. 2 previous roommates had filed similar complaints in other cities. He'd followed the same pattern: ingratiate himself, create conflict, then wage psychological warfare when rejected. We weren't his first victims, but we were determined to be his last. The other victims agreed to provide statements supporting our case. Their stories mirrored ours eerily: false reports, financial sabotage, relentless harassment. One had moved across the country to escape him. Another had changed careers after Craig destroyed her professional reputation. Caleb and I spent a Saturday organizing all our evidence with a lawyer helping us pro bono. Boxes of documentation filled our living room: photos, recordings, witness statements, police reports. The sheer volume was staggering. Months of our lives devoted to documenting one man's vendetta. Craig made a mistake when he approached one of my tutoring students outside school. He tried to give her a letter for me, but she ran to the principal instead. The school resource officer issued him a formal trespassing warning, another violation to add to our growing list. The restaurant where Caleb worked became an unexpected haven. His coworkers rallied around him, offering rides when our car was vandalized again, covering shifts when he had court appearances. The kitchen staff joked that they'd handle Craig themselves if he showed up, their protectiveness touching. I found strength in routine: school, tutoring, homework, helping Caleb with dinner. Each normal day felt like a small rebellion against Craig's attempts to destabilize us. My grades recovered fully, and I even joined the math club, surrounding myself with supportive peers. Craig's desperation became increasingly apparent. His harassment grew sloppier, easier to document. He left voicemails from his own phone, sent emails from his personal account. The careful orchestration of earlier months gave way to angry, impulsive actions that only strengthened our case. One afternoon, I arrived home to find Caleb meeting with a detective. Craig had been arrested again, this time for making terroristic threats after a particularly unhinged voicemail. The detective assured us they were building a solid case for serious charges this time. The building rallied around us completely. Neighbors took turns watching for Craig's car, creating an informal security network. Mrs. Chen organized a building meeting about safety, turning Craig's harassment into a catalyst for community strengthening. My tutoring business grew through word of mouth. Parents appreciated my patience and understanding, qualities developed through my own struggles. The income allowed me to contribute significantly to our household, easing Caleb's financial burden. Craig's family finally intervened after his second arrest. His parents, wealthy enablers who'd funded his lifestyle, hired lawyers to negotiate a plea deal. They wanted to avoid a trial that would expose their son's pattern of behavior publicly. We met with prosecutors to discuss our position. Caleb and I wanted Craig to face consequences, but more importantly, we wanted him gone from our lives permanently. The idea of testifying in court, reliving months of torment, felt overwhelming. The plea negotiations dragged on while Craig remained free on bail. He couldn't contact us directly, but his presence lingered. We'd rebuilt our lives around his absence, and the possibility of a trial kept us from fully moving forward. Caleb received a promotion to shift supervisor after just 2 months. His natural leadership and reliability impressed management. The raise meant we could afford our apartment comfortably, even start saving for the future. I submitted college applications, writing essays about resilience and family bonds. The guidance counselor helped me frame our experiences positively, focusing on growth rather than victimization. Several schools offered fee waivers after learning about our situation. Craig's lawyer contacted ours with a final offer. Craig would plead guilty to harassment and stalking charges, serve 6 months in jail, and agree to a permanent restraining order with a 1,000-foot radius. Additionally, he'd pay restitution for the damages to our property and moving expenses if we chose to relocate. Caleb and I discussed it over dinner at his restaurant after closing. The staff gave us privacy while we weighed our options. 6 months felt insufficient for what he'd put us through, but the permanent restraining order and restitution offered closure. We accepted the deal. Craig would serve his time, and we'd receive enough money to cover our debts and start fresh. Most importantly, the 1,000-foot radius meant he couldn't lurk just outside the legal limit anymore. The sentencing hearing was brief. Craig stood before the judge, his parents in the gallery looking ashamed. He accepted the plea without looking at us. The judge issued the permanent order, warning Craig that any violation would result in immediate imprisonment. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. Caleb put his arm around my shoulders as we descended the steps. We'd survived Craig's campaign of terror, emerged stronger and more united than ever. The restitution check arrived 2 weeks later, paid by Craig's parents to avoid their son serving additional time for non-payment. We paid off our debts, fixed the car properly, and put the rest in savings. Financial security felt foreign after months of struggle. Our neighbors threw a small party in the building's courtyard. Mrs. Chen made dumplings, Mr. Rodriguez brought music, and other residents contributed dishes. We celebrated not just Craig's defeat, but our community's resilience. Caleb's success at work continued. The restaurant owner spoke of opening a second location, wanting Caleb to help manage it. My brother, who'd nearly lost everything, was building a career through determination and hard work. I received acceptance letters from 3 colleges, all offering partial scholarships. The essay about overcoming adversity had resonated with admissions committees. Caleb cried when I showed him, proud that I'd achieved this despite everything. Our lives settled into peaceful routine. Caleb worked his shifts, I tutored and studied. We cooked dinner together most nights, talking about everything except Craig. His shadow faded gradually, no longer dominating our thoughts. The other victims Craig had tormented reached out occasionally, forming an unexpected support network. We shared updates, celebrated milestones, reminded each other that we'd survived. Their success stories inspired us to keep moving forward. 6 months later, Craig was released from jail. We received notification as required by law, but he didn't reappear appear in our lives. Sources told us he'd moved to another state, his parents finally cutting off financial support. He'd lost his power over us completely. I graduated high school with honors, my math teacher noting my resilience in her recommendation letter. Caleb attended the ceremony wearing his restaurant uniform, having rushed from work. His proud smile made every struggle worthwhile. The summer before college, I expanded my tutoring to full-time work. Parents trusted me with their children's education, and I discovered a genuine passion for teaching. The money I saved would help with college expenses. Caleb started dating a fellow restaurant worker, someone who knew our history but wasn't defined by it. Watching him slowly trust again, allowing someone new into our lives, marked true healing from Craig's psychological warfare. Our apartment, once a battlefield, became a genuine home. We redecorated with photos of happier times, plants from Mrs. Chen's garden, artwork from grateful tutoring students. Each addition reclaimed space Craig had tried to poison. The night before I left for college, Caleb and I sat on our balcony one last time. We'd survived the worst year of our lives, emerged victorious against someone who'd tried to destroy us. Our bond, tested by fire, had proven unbreakable. As we watched the familiar sunset, I thought about Craig somewhere far away, hopefully getting help for whatever drove his behavior. But mostly, I thought about the future. Caleb's growing career, my college adventure, the lives we'd built from the ashes of his harassment. We'd won not through legal battles or dramatic confrontations, but through persistence, community support, and refusing to let Craig's poison define us. Our victory was measured in normal days, peaceful nights, and the simple joy of living without fear. The war was over. We'd reclaimed our lives completely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but we'd face them together, stronger for having survived Craig's worst. Our story wasn't about him anymore. It was about us, and the bright future we'd earned through courage and love. I hope you have a wonderful day filled with the same strength these two showed. I will see you in the next one.